Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and today's quick look review is this, the latest greatest brand spanking new tool, Spitfire TR9 from Airfix. And first of all, a huge thank you to Dale at Airfix for agreeing to send this kit over for me to do this review for you. Thank you very much, Dale, appreciate it. So yes, Airfix have sent me this one direct for review. And I'm really interested to look at it. The bag is not yet opened. I have had a very quick look earlier today when it arrived, and I have to say it looks pretty good from that quick look. So first and foremost, why on earth a two-seat? Why another Spitfire? Airfix already had a newish tool Mark 9, didn't they? Why not? TR9 is, you could argue, a fairly odd choice, being as so few were ever made. I believe 20 of these were originally made post-war by Vickers Supermarine. And this layout you see here with this blister canopy is the original conversion style. And most of that 20 aircraft is still, most of those 20 are still flying, and most of them are based here in the UK. But that number is constantly being added to by conversions of previously single-seat Spitfires, and indeed some of these original two-seats have been reconverted back to single seats, and of course all of the original conversions were originally single seats, and that's a mouthful, isn't it? The very first Vickers built two-seater was MT818 or GAIDN, and you can still fly on that aircraft. It is based with the Biggin Hill Spitfire flight crew. Anyway, yeah, you could say quite an odd choice, and Dale did tell me that the new tool Mark 9 came about as a byproduct of bringing this kit to market, not the other way around. But actually, given the incredible popularity of two-seat Spitfire experience flights, I think that's actually a pretty canny choice, because it gives the option for those who've had the flight to then buy a kit and recreate that special moment in miniature. Anyway, enough said about that. The two-seat Mark 9 Spitfire. Let's have a look, see what we actually get for the money. And on that subject, the official recommended retail price for this is $29.99. A quick look online shows that it can be picked up for less, as you'd imagine, around about the £27 mark seems to be common. So standard Airfix offerings here. Let's pop those out of the way. As you can see, I've not yet been in here. And let's see what we get. I've got a rogue spinner. Some transparencies. Pop these over here as well. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sprues. So put them in order because I can. So first and foremost, frame A. Continuing the Bandai style frame number cutout things. These are great, they're very easy to see from both sides of the frame. I like it. This is in the darker sort of plastic again here that Airfix seem to be using now. And obviously it's immediately apparent that the fuselage halves are on this one, and we've got internal parts or cockpit parts, and obviously there are a few more cockpit parts than we're used to. So the fuselage halves then, no top cowl, and this is clearly a completely different fuselage half than any previous kit because the aft cockpit is already there. But even if that were not the case, you can see that this is a completely new tool by Airfix because it does have full rivet detail. It is in the recessed format, as you might expect, and it actually looks really good. It's quite fine, but it is a little bit deeper than you might get, or than you do get with Edward, for example, but it's not it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. Minimal internal detail because you've got these separate shells, but the top part of the cockpit is there. The doors are moulded in the closed position with crowbars moulded on, and you've just got some sort of frame detail there. Otherwise, here we've got a couple of instrument panels. This one has an aft face as well as a forward one, some bulkhead parts, some seat parts. And there's some quite good detail on all of these, on all these areas. Somewhat a little bit soft in places, but it really isn't bad. The worst offender for softness is this control column where the distinctive airlines are really not very obvious there. But on the other hand, the detail on the instrument panel is quite crisp. And just to give you a look at the surface detail, here it is. There's no attempt at any skin rippling here like on the larger kit, but we do have some slightly raised panels here and there. We've got the raised Zeus fastener detail. As you all know already, I'm not a fan of this, but this is relatively subtle at least, and it doesn't look too out of place with the rest of this surface detail. Now, a lot of reviewers would probably use the phrase, "It will look okay under a coat of paint." I absolutely despise that phrase, because if a coat of paint is hiding or lessening any surface detail on any kit ever, then that coat of paint is way too thick. This surface detail does look, on the face of it, a tad heavy, but in my experience, which when it comes to Airfix kits, to be honest, is quite extensive, is that a light layer of primer and a nice little sanding will diminish this detail to the point where it's almost indistinguishable from market leaders. So yes, you're going to want to put a little bit of your own effort into it, but sometimes modelling has to happen when we're modelling. And apologies if that comes across a little bit cynical, it's not meant that way. So there's frame A. Next up, because of my burgeoning OCD, I've arranged them in order, and this is frame B. Now, equally obviously to the first one, this contains our wing parts, but also some more cockpit areas, so frames essentially along this side. So here we've got the wing panels, and again fully riveted, and this is another thing that often happens with Airfix kits, and I don't know why, but the rivet detail on these parts looks much nicer right out of the box, right out of the gate, much more in keeping, shall I say. Still not quite as fine as Edward, but really, honestly, not very far off. So here we do have the gun and the cannon panels, but we also have fuel tank filler covers there. This is where the silver Spitfire has the extra fuel tanks in here, and you've got the wheel well bulge there, which is applicable to the later aircraft with the hard surface landing gear angles. I hope you can see that that surface detail is actually really nice, and that apparent panel line around the bulge is correct as well. So your lower surface, got raised panelling around where the wing fillet panels are, which is completely correct. And you'll note that all the gun bay panels are missing the various lumps, bumps and vents that they would have had when they were used to house armaments. It's very nice indeed. Moving on to frame C, and here we have all the odds and sods. Can I say that on here? Well, I just did. Yet more internal parts, just the smaller ones. There is another control column here, and this one bizarrely does have its airlines quite nicely in evidence. It's got another seat, oxygen bottles, seat adjusters and all that gubbins there. Tail planes here, which are of the late variety with the larger surface area elevator, and you only get the late variety. Ailerons, the tall rudder, so all of the Vickers aircraft had the tall rudder, bit more side surface area on the fuselage, so the greater surface area on the rudder was applicable. Then you've got radiator fairings with the doors, radiator cores, which are very, very nice, and wheelbase stuff. And as is becoming the norm now, separate wheelbase parts. The only way to correctly model the shape and inclination, note that they lean backwards, of these undercarriage bays is pretty much to do it like this. I think Tamiya were the first ones to do this, but everybody since has pretty much copied that. Again, the rivet detail on these parts is pretty acceptable. Fabric detail is that there's a very slight sort of surface wobble, but there's no effort to reproduce rib tapes and such. They are smooth, and I personally don't have an issue with that. And next up, frame D. Here is our upper cowling, moulded in one piece, so there is no join down the middle. It sports a representation of the sort of stretch / reinforcement panel along its aft edge. The intake here is not hollowed out, and it does have two mould seam lines, one down each corner. I'm hoping that will pick it up there. Those will need to be knocked out, but there is no rivet detail right next to them, so that's easy enough. And again, we've got the raised Zeus fasteners, and this time they are a bit in your face, and I would personally be looking to change them, or at least reduce the thickness of them. Here, one piece propeller, which as moulded is extremely fine. You can see how flexible it is, which gives you a clue as to how thin it is. It's very nice. This is where the spinner has come from. There's the back plate, and no doubt these are the spinning propeller pieces. The exhausts are, didn't Edward do this as well? 2 lots of 3, and you've got fishtail style here and the round style. These just interlock to give you 6 per side. The round ones are of course extremely easy to open up yourself, the fishtail variant less so, and the round ones are actually round as well, so when you drill them out they won't look horrendous because they weren't round in the first place. Then over here we have tyres. 3 different lots of wheel and tyre. I think it looks to me like these are weighted and these are not. These two are smooth tread, although they look like they're trying to be radial tread, and this has got a block type tread pattern on it. Two different undercarriage door variants. One will be to cater for raised undercarriage, I suspect. Then we have a choice of 3 or 4 spoke wheel hubs here, which is entirely in keeping actually. Torque links, tail wheel, and the actual undercarriage legs themselves. which do have a little bit of the sort of bell crank stuff on the top that the real thing has. It's all very, very competent. I can't really pick any major problems up here. The detail on the undercarriage legs is actually very good, and so is the tail wheel. And the last one is this little frame E, just this little one. This has got a pilot and the lucky passenger moulded here. Pilot gets to have separate arms. Passenger is keeping his hands right out of the way of everything, as they should. And you've got a pair of entrance doors here, so clearly we can cut the ones out of the fuselage and have open ones. I can't tell what that is straight off the bat. And some jigs, port and starboard. We'll find out what they're for shortly. The pilot isn't too bad, the passenger's a bit overly soft. They're both fairly softly moulded. However, with careful painting and closed canopies, I'd imagine they will suffice if you wish to have crew aboard your Spitfire. And that brings us neatly onto the transparencies. Frame X. Oh, and these are very, very good. Excellent clarity. They're beautifully done. You've got your underside ident lamp there, then open canopy parts, closed canopy parts, and the rear canopy parts. They're very nicely done. They're also relatively thin, and the framing is nice and sharply defined, which is useful. Excellent stuff. Okay, standard Airfix instructions then. We've got a little bit of history here on the front, which tells you a bit about... It just mentions that the first official two-seater was MT818, which was actually a Mark 8 originally, not a Mark 9. So that's that. Then you've got the usual blurb here, icons, etc. So, construction begins with the cockpits. And everything's built up onto one of these extra internal bits. Colours are noted obviously in Humbrol, and there's nothing too complex there. These are of course dual control aircraft, they're not just two-seaters. And eventually you end up with a little cockpit egg, like you can see here, which you can just pop into your fuselage halves. So the jigs then, let's see if we can figure out what those are for. Okay, I think the jig then, it's actually, well, I suppose it is kind of obvious. The jig is if you want closed canopies. So if you do want closed canopies on your model, you're going to have to remove the green area here. It's showing you a file, and you can just pop the jig, clearly don't glue it, pop the jig in place, and that will show you exactly how much to cut away so that you can have open canopies. You then will also cut away the doors if you wish the doors to be open as well. Okay, that's that mystery solved. So once all that is done, built all of this cockpit, all these seats and instrument panels up, add a couple of small parts and then sandwich that big cockpit sub-assembly into your fuselage halves. Tail feathers go on next. Building up the radiator and oil cooler fairings, and then onto the wheelbase. So you've got 2 spars on your 2 circles. And this is a relatively typical thing with Airfix now. Fit the lower wing to the fuselage and then fit the upper wings. I have found that they generally do fit together even if you build the wing up in one. But that would be something you'd want to test before committing to glue. Then, as we surmised with the parts, you've got different undercarriage doors which just plug into those non-weighted wheels for a retracted undercarriage version. And because Airfix have chosen to model the leg properly, there's a nice big stub there to join it, so it should be a reasonably sturdy assembly. That is an Achilles heel of a lot of Spitfire kits, so I do have quite frangible undercarriage, I find. And then we'll sandwich together our exhaust stubs. This is calling to use the fishtails. If ever there was a model build where I'll say check your references, it's something like this, because the majority of these are still flying. You've actually got a whole heap of marking choices to go with if you're prepared to put some effort into sorting the markings out yourself. So there will be differences with exhaust stubs and wheels in particular, and potentially also with internal equipment, although that's going to be not obvious from the outside. But most of these aircraft will have the round exhaust stubs now. And finally, propeller and canopies either open or closed as the modeler prefers. So moving on then to marking options. Airfix have missed a trick a little bit here, because this aircraft has only been identified as B-Flight Irish Air Corps number 161. So I did a bit of research so that you don't have to. And this is actually PV202. This aircraft is still airworthy, it's still flying, and you can fly with her from Duxford, which is with the Aerial Collective, which is the Aircraft Restoration Company's warbird experience provider. I think the aircraft has been airworthy for pretty much the entire time. Let's see. Scrolling. So PV202 came from Castle Bromwich, originally built as a single-seat LF Mark 9, entered service with the Royal Air Force in September 1944 with the 33 MU at RAF Lynham. It was then delivered to northern France and impressed into service with 33 Squadron, which was part of the 2nd Tactical Air Force. Eventually moving through to Belgium. 20 operational sorties in total with 33 Squadron, and before 33 took on the Hawker Tempest. So in early 1945 the aeroplane went to 412 Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force, which was flying from the Netherlands. And by the time she returned to the UK, had carried out 76 missions on top of the 20. So 96 operational sorties for this aircraft. It was then stored for 5 years before being selected by Vickers for conversion. After conversion, it was delivered to the Irish Air Corps in 1951 and served there until 1960. So upon ending of flying service, the aircraft went into use as a ground instructional trainer, in due course was then sold to an aircraft collector who was collecting aircraft for the Battle of Britain movie, and this was one of the two-seaters that was returned to flight for use in that movie. It then went to the Strathallan collection in Scotland before being acquired by Nick Grace in 1979. He then sold it on again to someone called Steve Atkins, who commenced a return to flight project, which took a long time, and the aircraft eventually flew again from Dunsfold in 1990, wearing the squadron colours and codes it had worn some 45 years prior with 412 Squadron, and it was operated like that around the airshow circuit in the 90s. It was due to be sold and sent to South Africa, but unfortunately was written off in an accident before that happened, and the aircraft restoration company then rebuilt the aircraft to flying condition again, finally returning to fly in these colours actually in 2005 in the hands of the managing director and test pilot of aircraft restoration company John Romain. And 2 months later, as a point of interest maybe, John Romain flew this aircraft with Alex Henshaw in the back seat. Over the years, the aircraft has been painted to depict a range of schemes relevant either to its own history or that of the Mark, and has carried thousands of passengers in the rear seat. Currently, the aircraft is dressed as ML365, as flown by Group Captain Peter Russell, Johnny Walker. So that's what this aircraft is. So the option provided for in the kit is as the aircraft was when newly converted originally in Irish Air Corps service. It's actually quite an interesting scheme, I think, that it's kind of different and colourful all at once. Overall, matte grey green, Airfix have suggested 78 cockpit green, and then with these big Irish tricolour markings on the wings. It's quite nice. The second option then is in fact the other aircraft that was used in the Battle of Britain film, the original Battle of Britain movie in 1969. And these aircraft were all painted. I mean, I don't think any of them were Mark 1s actually, but they were all painted up like Mark 1s and had really heavy-handed applique weathering painted onto them. So you can actually build quite a comical model of these, I think. This aircraft is in fact GAWGB, and this aircraft again is still airworthy and is still flying, and this is the one that now is wearing grey nurse colours, the Australian markings with a shark mouth, operating out of Biggin Hill. So that aircraft started life as TE308, which is listed as not having any early recorded life, and was another one that was selected for conversion in 1951 and was also delivered to the Irish Air Corps wearing the serial number 163. Went through a obviously similar journey after the film ended up in Canada and then moved on to Arizona before finally eventually coming back to the UK, where, as I say, she's still flying with the Biggin Hill group and you can still fly in this aircraft. But these markings show it as it was at the time of the Battle of Britain movie, so in pseudo Battle of Britain markings, and I think the two-seaters wore various different codes throughout filming, so it's another one that you can kind of pick and choose what you might want to do markings wise. So that's your instructions. The last bit then is the decals. Airfix decals are right up there. They're printed by Cartograph in the main. It doesn't say that on here, but I think that they are. They have fabulously tight carrier film. They're always in register, really good. They're great decals. There's really nothing to complain about with these. You see how tightly trimmed the carrier film is. They don't fall to bits. They don't crinkle up. They're great decals throughout. You've got some stencil detail. You've got prop stencils there, walkways, gun port covers if you want to use them, and of course there are 2 2 instrument panel sets there as well. You've got airframe stencils as relevant to each variant there. But of course the scheme options are virtually endless for these aircraft because they all wear different ones all the time. There's one in American markings now, you've obviously got the Australian one that I was just talking about, and all sorts of different Royal Air Force markings. So the world's your oyster really with this kit, which is why I think personally it was such a canny choice for Airfix. I don't know if Dale will mind me saying, but there are some plans afoot if funding can be sourced to create decal sheets of, with various of the flying aircraft to be marketed either by Airfix themselves or indeed by the people who operate these aircraft still. So there you go. That is a quick look at this brand new Spitfire from Airfix. I know there's going to be all kinds of modelers saying we don't need another Spitfire. Why do? Same old, same old. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if Edward made the definitive Spitfire Mark 9 in 1/48 scale, because Edward kits don't make any money for Airfix, and Edward have not yet done a 2-seater, and I suspect they probably won't either. So if you want a 2-seat Spitfire, this is it. I'm sure there are various conversions around, and you could possibly do some sort of homegrown affair if you really wanted to, but here it is in a box ready to go. It looks really, really nice on the frames. The surface detail about the best I've seen from Airfix yet, honestly. The detail level is stuck adequate for a straight from the box build. The price, it is what it is. Arguably a tiny bit high when you can buy an Edward Profi Pack kit for less. It does make these look a little less attractive, but I have to say that I think Edward are the ones that are out of step here, not Airfix, as in I think Edward kits are cheap rather than I think Airfix kits are particularly expensive. That is just my opinion, and you are perfectly free to disagree, but I see it more as Edward being out of step than Airfix, because Edward kits I think at the moment look slightly unnaturally cheap, and I suspect they will rise before too long. So of course Airfix have retooled this to provide a single seat version. I have not seen that kit, I'm not sure it's even out yet. Obviously that will be modified to depict a wartime aircraft, so it should be slightly different to this kit, but I suspect broadly speaking it will be at the same level, and that level is very, very good by the looks of this. So again, huge thanks to Dale for sending this over. Huge thanks to Jonathan Mock, the Decal guy, for sending me a little bit of extra information on those marking options, although all of that information it is accessible via Google if you look for it. And thanks to all of you for watching this review. I hope it's been useful. And with all of that said, I think it only remains for me to say, until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.